Hi, my name is Kendra.
My name is Maria.
My name is Nikki.
And my name is Marquita.
Welcome to this episode of CultureCast.
Today we will be analyzing Death and the King's Horseman by Nigerian author Wole Soyinka.
The author's name is Akiwande Oluwo Soyinka. Soyinka was born into a Yoruban culture in July 13, 1934 in Abeokuta, Nigeria. He is the most successful African playwright and poet. After studying in Nigeria and the UK, he worked with the Royal Court Theatre in London. He went on to write plays that were produced in both countries. He also took an active role in Nigeria's political history and its struggles for independence from Great Britain. He was against all regiments, and during the regime of General Sani Abacha, Soyinka escaped from Nigeria and ended up in the United States, where he was a professor at Cornell, Harvard, Yale, and Emory University. In 1999, he returns to Nigeria. During his lifetime, he wrote 27 plays, which the most famous ones are The Lion and the Jewel, A Dance of the Forest, The Strong Breed, Conds Harvest, Madam and Specialist, and The Death and the King's Horseman. Soyinka won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1986. He is the first African writer to receive this award. Death and the King's Horseman was written by Wole Soyinka in 1975. This play was written based on Soyinka's life experience being raised under Yoruban influences and living through British colonization.
Historical context is very important to the play, being based on real-life events. The area that we know as Nigeria today is home to more than 250 ethnic tribes, including the Yoruba, which is one of the largest. Beginning in 1901, the British colonized the Yoruba Land, creating arbitrary country boundaries and destroying ethnic traditions of the native people. Colonization ended around 1960, but the damage caused to the different groups was permanent and irreversible.
Nigeria is known as the Yoruba Line and other near countries as Benin and Togo. Currently, several million people still practice this today. Yoruban culture is animistic, which means that their existence is governed by a religion that have a large amount of spirits and gods that usually interacts in an animal form with humans. Yoruba people believe in a deep connection between the gods and themselves in order to have a whole and complete life. Each region have their own personal gods, but there are gods which are common in all communities. They call their gods Orishala. Among these Orisha, the Yorubans see the god Ogun as among the most important, the god of war, of the hunt, the outer working, and warriors. Death and the King's Horseman reflects an event in Yoruba culture, where several weeks after the king dies, his horseman needs to be killed in order for the spirit of the king to freely rise to where it belongs. For the horseman, this is an honor, and a huge celebration is made for this. Before the horseman is executed, he can ask for anything he desires, and it needs to be given to him. Yoruban theater origins seems to be traced to the masquerade of the Gungun. The traditional ceremony culminates in the essence of the masquerade, where the presence of ancestors return to the world of the living to visit their descendants. The Yoruba theater seems to arise from the Alaringo, which is a group of dance theater. These performers will use masquerade and will transmit an air of mystery. They create short, satirical scenes. Their performances utilize mime, music, and acrobatics. The Alaringo tradition influenced the Yoruban traveling theater, which was the most prevalent and highly developed from the theater in Nigeria from 1950s to 1980s. In the 1990s, the Yoruban traveling theater moved into television and film, and now do live performance only rarely. Hubert Ogunda is known as the father of contemporary Yoruban theater. Total theater also developed in Nigeria in 1950. It utilizes non-naturalistic techniques, surrealistic physical imagery, and a flexible use of language.
There are so many different types of characters in the play, so I'm going to start by talking about the principal characters. Principal characters are the characters in the play who play the most important roles throughout the script. In Death and the King's Horseman, Allison would be considered the main principal character. Ellison is the chief horseman of the dead king, which is an important role in Yoruba culture. He lived a good life, and now that the king is dead, he is expected to take his own life to ensure the king is not alone in the afterlife. Ellison at first seems like he wants to fulfill the ritual and take his life, but becomes too attached to his great life and ends up getting arrested. In the end, he does commit suicide and join this king. He ends up killing himself while in jail at the end of the play. Another important character in the play is Simon Pilkins, who is a district officer. Pilkins' job is to maintain order in Nigeria, which he does not do very nicely due to the fact that he does not care about their culture or Africans. He is also the reason that Ellison ends up getting arrested, making it harder for him to fulfill his duty. Pilkins also does not like to speak to anyone who is not European because he does not support the culture of the Yorubas. Jane Pilkin is Simon Pilkins' wife, and she also speaks a lot throughout the play. She acts more as a person for Simon Pilkins to bounce ideas off of. Jane also gives some advice to other characters throughout the play herself. She is much more understanding of the cultures that surround her, but she would never stand up to her husband if it came down to it. Secondary characters are the characters in the play that are also important, but not as important as the principal characters. Amusa is one of the secondary characters, and he is the surgeon in the Native Administration Police. He is an important character because although he is of African race, he is working for the British colonists, which is not accepted by his people. The fact that he is African makes Simon Pilkins, his district officer, not trust him because Africans cannot be trusted and are not intelligent. The next secondary character would be Olundi. Olundi is the son of Ellison and was sent away to become a doctor by the Pilkins. He comes home to bury his father after he heard about the king's death, but finds out that his father has not completed his duty. Olundi is disgusted by his father and takes his own life instead. This is what leads Ellison to take his own life by hanging himself. Iyaloja is the mother of Ellison and also the voice of wisdom throughout the play. She knows from the start that Ellison is too in love with his own charm to give up the beautiful life he is living. She explains the danger that will come if he does not take his own life. We also decided to include the bride as a secondary character, because although she has no lines, she is the reason Ellison does not want to complete the ritual. After sleeping with her and finding out she is a virgin, you can tell he starts holding back from completing the ritual. The bride also ends up being pregnant with Ellison's child, which can ruin their way of life because Ellison should be dead. Another secondary character is the praise singer, who acts as Ellison's conscience. The praise singer is supposed to follow Ellison on his last great journey and then ensure that he does what he is supposed to for the ritual and take his own life. The last semi-important character in this play would be Joseph, who is the servant boy of the Pilkins. He is the one who tells Simon Pilkins about the ritual and what it is about.
We determined that this is a climactic play, mostly because of the rise action in multiple parts. We chose climactic because the rise action could be multiple parts in the story, whether it be when Mr. Pilkins found out that a man was trying to kill himself for tradition, or when Amusa visits the village to make an arrest. The climax could also be when the son kills himself.
The plot is broken into 5 scenes. In scene 1, the play begins with Ellison Oba walking through the village, followed by a praise singer. The king has just died, and it is Ellison's duty as the head horseman to commit ritual suicide to accompany the king into the afterlife. The women of the village praise Ellison as he walks by. A young woman catches Ellison's eye, and Ellison says he wishes to marry her for his last night of pleasure on earth. As the noble horseman, he gets what he wants. Scene 2. In the second scene, we are introduced to Simon Pilkins, the British district officer, and his wife Jane. They are wearing traditional Yoruban Igungun costumes, which scare the Pilkins' African sergeant, Amusa. After Amusa gets over the scare, he delivers Pilkins the news that Ellison will commit ritual suicide. Pilkins is appalled by this thought and decides that Ellison must be arrested before he can kill himself. In scene 3, Amusa is sent by Pilkins to go to the village and arrest Ellison immediately. When Amusa gets there, he is stopped and berated by the village women, who chase him off, satirizing the British. Meanwhile, Ellison and his bride have been married, and Ellison is approaching the final steps of his suicide ritual.
The fourth act opens up at the home of the resident, the British chief officer. As the prince enters the ballroom, accompanied by an orchestra playing Royal Britannia, the prince admires Simon and Jane's Egungun attire. They then joins the dancing. Altered by Musa, Simon and the resident have a whispered conference in the hallway. Simon tells his superior about the strange custom that Ellison will be prevented from carrying out, and the men agree that there must be no trouble while the prince is visiting. Realizing that it is midnight, Simon leaves hurriedly for the marketplace, leaving Jane to enjoy the rest of the ball. As soon as Simon is gone, Ellison's son Alunde steps from the shadows to speak with Jane. He gently rebukes her for wearing the scared Egungun garments for a trivial purpose. He thinks the British are a disrespectful people, but praises the courage British men have shown in fighting the Second World War, which is raging in Europe but almost unnoticed in Nigeria. Alunde needs to speak with Simon and asks for Jane's help in finding him. Word reached Alunde in England that the king has died, and Alunde knows that on this night he will be called as oldest son to bury his father. He also knows that Simon will try to prevent Ellison's suicide, and he wants to stop Simon from making this mistake. He tries to explain to Jane that the tradition is sacred and that it holds the universe on course. Even if she and Simon cannot understand it, he can calmly accept his father's death because he knows it is necessary. Simon returns, and Alunde thanks him for not interfering, but there is a commotion outside, and Alunde hears Ellison's voice. Ellison is alive, shouting accusations at the white men who have brought him shame. Against all propriety, the father and son see each other, something they are forbidden to do once the king is dead. Disgusted by Ellison's failure, Alunde says, "I have no father," and walks away. The final scene reinforces what the play has been about, not a clash of cultures, but the inadequacy of one culture to judge another. The final act is set in Ellison's prison cell. Simon comments on the peaceful night, but Ellison corrects him, telling him that because the ritual has not been enacted, the world will never know peace again. Simon cannot understand the importance of Ellison's failure and rejects any suggestion that something is amiss. The two discuss Alunde's fate. Simon is sure that Alunde will return to England to continue his studies. Ellison is proud that his son, who had seemed to reject his own culture, was a man enough to reject him. Eloja comes to Ellison, reminding him of her earlier warning. She knows that Ellison's, not Simon, is at fault for not carrying out his suicide because he allowed himself to be distracted by the young women. And Ellison accepts the blame. Eloja reveals that she has brought a burden, the body of Alunde, who has killed himself in his father's place. When he sees his son, Ellison manages to strangle himself with his chains. The bride does her wifely duty, closing Ellison's eyes with dirt, and then leaves with Eloja, who consoles her. Now forget the dead, forget even the living. Turn your mind only to the unborn.
This play is considered a tragedy and contains all the necessary aspects. A tragedy must contain a reversal where things turn out differently and more disastrously for the tragic protagonist than expected, and a recognition where the protagonist moves from ignorance to knowledge. The reversal would be Ellison's transformation from a highly respected and noble position as the king's horseman at the beginning of the play to his loss of dignity when he is sitting in the prison cell at the end of the play, leading to his suicide. Ellison recognizes only at the end of the play that he was selfish in wanting to postpone his death in favor of indulging in human pleasures, and he failed his duty as the king's horseman. Ellison is clearly the tragic hero of the play. As the king's head horseman, Ellison is of high status in the community, well respected and honored, and the right-hand man of the king. His hamartia, or tragic flaw, is his greed and selfishness. His fear for death and desire for sex, celebration, and feasting caused him to postpone his duty of death, putting the whole world of the living and cosmic balance in jeopardy. This character flaw is heightened by Officer Pilking's interference with their culture. Because Pilkings intervenes and stops Ellison before he can go through with the act, we never really know if Ellison would have done it or not. In the end, after Ellison is disgraced by being taken to the British officers and put in jail, and Ialoja says how he betrayed everyone, he realizes his shameful mistakes. Ellison goes through catharsis and admits his wrongdoings when he says, on page 664, "My powers have deserted me, my charms, my spells, even my voice lacked strength when I made to summon the powers that would lead me over the last measure of earth and into the land of the fleshless. May the world forgive me." He realizes too late the damage he has done and that he must commit suicide.
Narrative techniques are used multiple times throughout the play. Foreshadowing and irony are shown from the beginning of the play when Ellison is enjoying his last day on earth. Everyone is chanting a song that is called Not I Bird, which is a song about a bird who fails to fulfill his duty of death. The song explains that death came to take the bird and the bird would not go. Ellison proudly tells everyone that he is not like the bird and is ready to fulfill his duty and complete the ritual. The reason this is foreshadowing is that as the play goes on, Ellison does not fulfill his duty like he had said he wanted to. This would also be irony because it is clearly ironic that the bird would not take his life in the song and now Ellison does not want to take his own life either. The use of the bird could also be symbolizing because Ellison is using the bird as a symbol of death or suicide. During the play, the Pilkings are wearing an outfit called the Ugungun, which is a sacred outfit for the Yoruba people. When the Pilkings have the Ugungun on, Amuzo will not speak to them because it is against his religion and beliefs. The reason for this is because Ugunguns represent death, which is another symbol throughout the play. The use of language is also important in this play. There is a clear distinction between the very lyrical, poetic language of the Yoruba people and the simple British English that the Pilkings speak. The Yoruba often use ancient proverbs when speaking, which involves complex language, metaphor, and similes, such as the quote of a praise singer on page 664. Ellison's riddles are not merely the nuts in the kernel that breaks the human teeth. He also buries the kernel in hot embers and dares a man's fingers to draw it out. Pilkin at one point even says to Ellison, "What are you saying now? Christ, must your people forever speak in riddles?" This shows even more the cultural distance between the two groups. The three worlds become an extremely important part of this play once analyzed. The Yoruba culture believes that there are three worlds that their people live in, which we refer to as the unborn, the living, and the dead. The Yoruban call these worlds the world of the living, the world of the ancestry, and the world of the unborn. The balance must be kept in all three of these worlds to be able to have a happy life and not taste the ashes of the undead. This is a big part of why it is so important for Ellison to die, because without him dying, the order will be broken. This becomes even more clear on page 664 when Ialoja says, "I warned you, if you must leave a seed behind, be sure it is not tainted with the curse of the world. Who are you to open a new life when you dare not open the door to a new existence?" What she means by this is that the bride is pregnant with Ellison's child. This is now a curse because a baby cannot be born when he has not completed his lifely duty of taking his own life.
In relation to other texts, Death in the Salesman, the theme of suicide and ending the play with a prominent death, not one but two people died in the death in the King's Horseman. Kabuki Theater. Even though Kabuki Theater is more musical, my idea of the drums being constantly played throughout the play to symbolize death or happiness reminds me of Kabuki, because each song in the musical theater represents something symbolic to the culture. Americana by Chimamanda Adichie. It's a book about understanding culture where a Nigerian woman had to learn to adjust her lifestyle to the American culture, similar to Olunde. A big thing in The Death of the King's Horseman was being misunderstood, especially in scene 4, where Jane really wanted to understand Olunde, and similar to the play, the main characters of the story are Nigerian, but are from the Igbo tribe and not Yoruba.
The real problem between the Yoruban people and their British colonizers is not that there's a clash of cultures. This oversimplified observation implies that the two groups were on an even playing field and simply didn't mesh well with each other. Soyinka makes sure to point this out in the author's note that precedes the play. He says that the real problem goes beyond this, and it happens when one attempts to interpret and judge another's culture without understanding or knowing anything about it. An ethnocentric point of view was the cause of all problems between British officer Pilkings and the Yoruban people. Pilkings didn't mean any harm when he tried to stop Ellison's suicide. He just couldn't comprehend the fact that this custom was acceptable and a normal part of life for their people. He didn't understand the complications that he caused for the Yorubans when interfering. This is evident in Scene 2 when Mr. and Mrs. Pilkings are getting dressed for the ball. Amusa is genuinely frightened by their use of the Igungun costume, but Mr. and Mrs. Pilkings just blow it off, making fun of him. Mrs. Pilkings says, "I think you've shocked his big pagan heart, bless him," and tells him that the juju won't hurt him. To them, it's just a joke, and they have no understanding that to the Yoruban people, it's not. Towards the end of the scene, Joseph explains the seriousness of the native law and custom, and Pilkings has a hard time understanding. Olunde is the one character in the play who gets past this ignorance. He has had experience in both Yoruban and English customs, and when asked his opinion of his father by Pilkings, said, "I cannot judge him, and if I cannot judge him, I cannot despise him." Although this play focuses on the struggles between the Yoruban and British cultures specifically, the underlying lesson of the need for cultural understanding can relate everywhere in this modern, ethnocentric world.
We hope you enjoyed this Culture Cast.
Be sure to tune in next time.